Welcome to the training video for the FRICS RMF Self-Assessment Tool, also called RSAT. The user guide that supports this software documents all of the content in this video. The user guide also provides a list of references that are mentioned throughout this training video. It is suggested that participants review this list and familiarize themselves with the documents prior to proceeding. RSAT is an Excel document with several worksheets and Visual Basic programming to aid system owners in completing RMF steps 1 through 3. RSAT contains worksheets that generate forms that mirror DoD EMAS templates. During this demonstration, I'm going to demonstrate each of the RSAT worksheets and their relationship to RMF. RSAT is intended to supplement and simplify the RMF process, but not serve as a replacement. RSAT is a time savings to the RMF community. RSAT worksheets step through RMF steps 1 through 3. The databases auto-populate RSAT worksheets with standard responses based on FRICS characteristics, as well as simple user selections. The User Guide, RSAT Instructions tab, and pop-up menus guide the user through the necessary input selections and options to tailor the auto-populated data. RSAT generates forms that mirror EMAS templates and that are required to document the RMF process. These templates allow users a starting point to tailor documentation to their specific system. RSAT created worksheets can be exported directly into EMAS templates. This saves the user time in completing the RMF process. In addition, the EMAS system requires a user account. The RSAT created worksheets are formatted similar to EMAS templates. This allows the user to start the RMF process prior to obtaining an EMAS account. When RSAT is opened, the user can access a blue Instructions tab with an overview of each worksheet. There are 4 orange-colored tabs that serve as user input forms, as well as a yellow-colored tab that summarizes the security controls. There are also 5 hidden worksheets that contain lookup tables and databases used by RSAT to auto-populate worksheet forms. These tabs have fixed data and are not modifiable by the user. I'm going to provide a brief explanation of each of the orange worksheets in this training video. But first, I want to make users aware of a color designation that is used throughout RSAT. Orange cells are fields that require data entry by the user. The data in these fields is used in subsequent RSAT worksheets. Green cells are fields that are optional data entry by the user. These fields aid in the documentation of the RMF process, but do not necessarily require input. Gray cells are data fields that are not applicable given the current entries in the RSAT fields. However, the color of these data fields may change to orange or required based on the information that is entered by the user. The System Information Form is intended to collect information about the system that is necessary for auto-population of subsequent worksheets. This worksheet should be the first form completed by the user. The worksheet is color-coded to indicate the necessity of data entry that I previously described. This RSAT form serves 2 purposes. First, required information that will be used by RSAT to auto-populate subsequent RSAT worksheets is entered in this worksheet. These entries are the 5 orange-colored fields on the form. Secondly, the template serves as an offline repository where data that is useful during the EMAS system registration can be collected for manual entry into the EMAS system at a later date. These are the multiple green fields on the form. These fields do not require user entry. There is no need to take the time to enter data if the system has already been registered in EMAS. These fields may be useful to a system owner that does not have an EMAS account but would like to begin collecting information for future system registration. There are note boxes that appear as the user scrolls over the optional fields to help explain the required entry. For the remainder of this demonstration, I'm going to focus on the 5 user-required entries in the orange-colored fields. The first user-required field is the system owner or project manager. This text will be auto-filled into subsequent RSAT forms wherever a responsible person's name must be entered. An example would be the Tested By field on the EMAS test results form. The next field is the estimated date of self-assessment submission. This is the date the self-assessment is to be submitted to the validation team. The date entered will be auto-populated on EMAS documentation wherever a completion date is required. The third required field is the DoD component. The DoD component is the entity that has authorization responsibility for the system. For example, the Department of the Army. This entry is auto-populated on RSAT forms to identify the responsible entity applicable to component policies. The fourth required field is the system name. This field is self-explanatory, and the data entered in this field is auto-filled at the top of subsequent RSAT forms for reference. The final required field is the facility-related control system type. This entry is based on the FRICS Master List, which is a document that is published on the RMF Knowledge Service web portal. The FRICS Master List was developed to standardize what qualifies as FRICS and provide a taxonomy and risk guidance for unique FRICS types. The drop-down options list all of the FRICS types identified on the FRICS Master List. The data selected by the user in this field will be used to automatically select information types and develop the provisional security categorization on subsequent RSAT forms. For the remainder of this demonstration, I'm going to select a microgrid control system as the FRICS type. The security categorization form identifies a provisional impact level applicable to RMF Step 1. The form is populated based on the FRICS type identified on the System Information Form. This was the first worksheet in the RSAT. This form should be completed after the 5 required fields on the System Information Form are complete. The security categorization is required to complete the system registration in EMAS, and the impact levels are also used to build the security baseline in subsequent RSAT forms. The sheet is color-coded to indicate the necessity of data entry that I previously discussed. I will start by pointing out that all of the fields on this form are optional. There are no required entries by the user. The green optional fields provide opportunities for the user to tailor the auto-populated security categorization. RSAT has auto-filled the NIST information types and provisional impact levels based on the FRICS type selected on the previous form. In this example, I selected a microgrid control system. The system name and FRIX types are displayed at the top of the form for reference. The RSAT has auto-populated the security impact levels for confidentiality, integrity, and availability associated with each of the information types. The data on this form will change to reflect the user-selected FRIX type entered on the first worksheet. I'm going to demonstrate this by changing the FRIX type on the system information form and showing how the data updates on this sheet. If I return to the system information form and select a navigation control system, the security categorization form is updated with new information types as well as new provisional impact levels. Returning to the system information form, I'm going to reselect the microgrid control system as my FRIX type. The RSAT automatically updates the security categorization form with the impact types and provisional impact levels associated with this FRIX type. At the top of the form, the system name and FRIX type are noted for reference. Users must review the auto-populated information types and provisional impact levels. Users should reference FIPS 199 and NIST 800-60 to familiarize themselves with the security categorization process and guidelines to assist with this tailoring. I'm going to discuss how the RSAT worksheet may be tailored by the user. First, the user must review the auto-populated information types beginning in row 6. The RSAT populated information types are based on the user's selected FRIX type. This uses data from the master list. The description field allows the user the opportunity to enter a description of how the information type is present in the FRIX. The Modify button allows the user the opportunity to add or remove information types by selecting them from a drop-down list. When I select the Modify button, a drop-down list of information types appears. The modifiable options that appear in this window are based on NIST 800-60. I'm going to add an information type, Program Evaluation, by selecting the box next to this information type. I can select OK or Cancel to go back to the original list. By selecting OK, the Program Evaluation information type is added to my list. I'm also going to demonstrate how to use the Modify button to remove an information type. In this case, I'd like to remove the Facilities, Fleet, and Equipment Management information type from my security categorization. By again selecting Modify, the full list of information types appears. The information types that are selected for my system have checks in the appropriate box. By deselecting the Facilities, Fleet, and Equipment Management information type and selecting OK, this information type is removed from my list. I am also able to use the default information types at any time, which returns to the information types associated with the FRIX master list. Selecting OK selects the appropriate selection that I've made, and Cancel returns without change. Secondly, the user must review the provisional security impact levels auto-populated for each information type. The auto-populated data is based on NIST 800-60, Volume 2. Each information type has a row that allows the user the opportunity to adjust the impact level. Users should review NIST 800-60, Volume 1 for information regarding the rationale for the security level as they apply to the information types. Special factors text is provided in the columns to the right of the information type identifiers for any information type that is listed on the FRICS master list. This text provides key considerations for tailoring the impact levels. I'm going to demonstrate how to adjust the impact level by changing the confidentiality for information type energy supply from low to moderate. By selecting the adjusted impact level row and using the drop-down menu, I select a moderate impact level for the energy supply information type. When the adjustment is made, the user-adjusted impact level will override the provisional level in the calculation of the overall security determination. Each time an adjustment is made, the justification field changes from gray, which is not applicable, to orange, which indicates required. This indicates that a justification or explanation is necessary by the user to justify the change. The overall system impact level is the high water mark of the security impact levels and will be used to build the security baseline on subsequent RSAT forms. It is also important to note that the RSAT builds on user selections. Each time the FRICS system type is changed on the system information form, the information types and provisional impact levels are cleared and repopulated. I'm going to demonstrate by returning to the system information form and reselecting the navigation control system. When I return to my security categorization form, the FRICS type and system name, as well as the information type and provisional impact levels for this facility related control system are repopulated. If I return to the system information form and reselect a microgrid control system as the facility related control system type, my security categorization form is repopulated with the data that's on the FRICS master list. I need to go back and reselect all the tailored options to repopulate my sheet. The control information form is where the baseline control set is built based on the current security categorization. This is applicable to RMF Step 2 and uses the same general format as the EMAS template of the same name. This form should be completed after the security categorization form is complete. When I open the form, data from the previous update of the form is still populated. The system name and security impact levels are displayed at the top of the form for reference. This form must be updated each time the security impact levels are changed on the previous worksheet. A pop-up alert may appear when the user enters this form to notify them that the displayed baseline needs to be updated to reflect the current security categorization. This alert is shown on the screen. Pop-up alerts such as this one guide the user through data entry fields. These alerts clue the user to ensure that proper data is selected or entered. The content of all pop-up alerts and messages that appear when using the RSAT are explained in the user guide. To populate this form, the user must select the Update Form button. When the Update Form button is selected, a pop-up menu appears. This menu gives the user an option to choose an overlay to apply. RSAT will build the security control baseline using the impact levels identified on the security categorization form. The populated controls are based on CNSSI 1253, which is a tailored baseline of NIST 800-53 controls required for RMF. Each overlay option populates the form to identify controls that are removed from this baseline. I'm going to briefly discuss the populated data in the implementation plan portion of the form as I demonstrate each of the overlay options. A summary of this information is provided in the user guide. Selecting No Overlay populates the form with applicable CNSSI controls and data fields. Again, this baseline control list is based on the security categorization impact levels referenced at the top of the form. The populated rows are color-coded to identify the necessity of data entry. Orange cells are required cells that must be populated prior to import of the external template into EMAS. Auto-filled entries are intended as a time savings for the user. These entries should be reviewed and tailored to ensure that the entry is applicable to the actual implementation status of the control. All required fields are fully or partially auto-filled. The implementation status of all applicable baseline controls is populated as planned. An exception is a control that is assessed and validated by DoD policy and guidance. These controls are populated as inherited. An example is CA6 and CA7. The common control provider for these controls is entered as the DoD for a Tier 1 control, which has relevant policy or guidance by the DoD, or component for a control that has service-specific policy and guidance. Another exception are controls that are not applicable to FRICS. This list of controls is based on the Unified Facilities Criteria Cybersecurity of FRICS, Table H2. An example is Control AC22. The implementation status of these controls is set to not applicable, and the justification references the UFC. The Security Control Designation field is also auto-populated by RSAT. The selected designation is based on NIST 800-53 descriptions of the security control. Common is populated for controls with requirements that are typically inherited by DoD or organizational policy. System-specific is populated for controls with requirements unique to systems and assumed methods of control implementation. And hybrid is populated for controls that have requirements that are both common and system-specific. The estimated completion date is the value specified by the user on the system information form. The responsible entity is populated to identify the DoD or component level entity that is responsible for the inherited controls. This EMAS text field identifies the entity responsible for implementing each security control. The DoD Chief Information Officer is populated for controls that are inherited by DoD or Tier 1 level policy. And the user-entered DoD component is populated for controls that are inherited by service-specific or Tier 2 level policy. The responsible entity for the remaining controls must be tailored by the user. This is a required field on the EMAS template and must be completed prior to importing into EMAS. The Commons field is an optional field for the EMAS template. This field has been populated with information that may be useful to the user for the tailoring of data. For example, the justification of FRICS non-applicability with guidance from the UFC Table H2 has been populated, or the designation of an inherited DoD control is populated in this field. This is an optional field for the EMAS template. The risk assessment fields are also optional fields in RMF Step 2, and these are not auto-filled by RSAT. I'm now going to select the Industrial Control System overlay to demonstrate how RSAT tailors the fields differently based on this selection. This option identifies controls that are not applicable based on the NIST 882 ICS overlay. When I select OK to populate the form, the controls that are not applicable to this overlay are identified, and the not applicable justification is populated with text to point to the ICS overlay. Selecting this option repopulates the list to identify all controls removed by the ICS overlay. Similarly, there is an option to select the DoD CIO overlay for FRICS with a moderate across-the-board security baseline. By selecting the FRICS moderate overlay, an accurate populated list of controls that are not applicable based on this overlay is identified. Similarly, controls that are removed by this overlay are repopulated and identified with text that points to the FRICS moderate overlay. I would now like to address the continuous monitoring portion of the EMAS template. The color of the fields is set by RSAT to identify the necessity of entry. Any field that is colored orange, which indicates required data, must have a valid entry to import properly into EMAS. RSAT auto-populates these required fields with a generic entry based on the NIST 800-53 descriptions and assessment procedures. The continuous monitoring portion of this form must be tailored to organizational specific reporting frequencies, methods, and tracking mechanisms. For example, the reporting field has been populated with text that states non-compliant controls are reported to the ISSM. Another example is the tracking field, which has been populated with text that states the POEM will be updated. The user may choose to adjust this auto-populated text to reflect organizational reporting procedures. Again, the auto-populated data is intended to save the user time by giving them a starting point for the initial tailoring process. The frequency and method columns are drop-down entry fields on the EMAS template. These fields have also been auto-populated with data based on the NIST 800-53 descriptions for each control. An entry of undetermined has been auto-populated when a standard response is not appropriate for the control. These fields should always be reviewed by the user. The SLCM comments field is a required field in the EMAS template to identify who reports what, to whom, and by when. RSAT has auto-filled this field with text as a starting point. In some cases, this text references an ISSM checklist. This is a supporting template that accompanies the RSAT software. This SLCM comments field always requires additional user tailoring to address the organizational policies and procedures specific to each control. As mentioned at the beginning of this training video, the RSAT forms can be exported into offline EMAS templates. An EMAS control information template is displayed on the screen. The fields in the external EMAS template must be formatted properly to allow import into EMAS. The data on the RSAT forms has been properly formatted to ensure importability. After opening the EMAS template, I have selected the template worksheet and have enabled content in Excel. The orange, green, and gray fields on this EMAS template are fields that allow user entry. The fields without color are read-only fields that are populated by EMAS. A 2020 update to the Control Information EMAS template included the addition of a read-only comment titled Compliance Status. This column is not displayed on the RSAT Control Information form. Selecting the Export Data button will open a list of Excel files in the Select Workbook for Comparison window. I start by selecting the appropriate file to run the export. If my appropriate EMAS template is not displayed in this window, I should cancel, open the appropriate template, and then select the Export Data button once again. The options available to me are to cancel or run the export. When I run the export, a pop-up menu appears to make sure I want to overwrite the data in my external template. Selecting Yes will initiate the export of data. RSAT exports the data using a match on the control number between the RSAT form and the external EMAS template. For best results, the baseline of the external template should match the baseline designated in RSAT. It is important to clarify that RSAT will not import into a completely blank external template. This is because there would be no control numbers to match. When the population is complete, a list of non-exported values may appear in a pop-up window. These controls should be noted because they may require follow-up. These are the controls that have been identified by the RSAT software as applicable to the applied security categorization. However, they were not found in the external EMAS template. Following export, the user should review this list. These controls may need to be added to the EMAS system manually. The external EMAS template has macros that update the color coding of the external template. The user has the option to activate the macros in the external sheet. The external EMAS template will properly import without the color legend enabled, but this option is strongly recommended because it assists the user when tailoring the template. The external color legend will enable the user to identify fields that are required for data entry prior to import into the EMAS system. I am now displaying on the screen the external template that has been populated by RSAT. RSAT has transferred the data from the fields in the RSAT form into the external template. Prior to moving to the next RSAT worksheet, I want to reiterate some important points. First, the RSAT populated data is a starting point for the user and is intended to save the user time. The user should review the populated fields and tailor the responses to their specific system. Secondly, this EMAS template will not import properly if any required field is blank. Required fields, once again, are shaded orange. The user should review any of the orange shaded fields on the EMAS template and enter data prior to import. For example, in this demonstration, the responsible entity is an orange field that must be tailored by the user prior to re-importing this template into the EMAS system. Prior to continuing with the training video, I want to explain the relationship between RSAT forms and EMAS templates. The EMAS system allows users to export system-specific templates for offline data entry. These offline templates can be tailored by the user. The EMAS system will not allow the re-import of external templates that have been incorrectly formatted, specifically within fields that have dates or drop-down entries. The EMAS system will display an error if a user attempts to import a template with data entered into fields in an incorrect format. The EMAS system unfortunately does not generate specific details regarding the error, so troubleshooting entries in offline templates can be difficult. The RSAT software auto-populates data into spreadsheets that has been formatted to match EMAS template formatting. This avoids input errors. It is suggested that a user import the RSAT populated EMAS templates into the EMAS system and then re-export the EMAS templates prior to additional tailoring. Multiple import and export of templates will provide users with fewer data fields to review if an error is generated by the EMAS system. The test results form is where evidence and implementation descriptions for CCIs are documented. The Control Correlation Identifier Numbers, or CCIs, are the decomposition of security control requirements into singular, actionable statements. This RSAT form is applicable to RMF Step 3 and corresponds to an EMAS template of the same name. When the form is opened, the security controls listed are applicable to the last time the form was updated. A pop-up alert may appear if the user selected impact levels do not match the displayed data. The form must be updated each time the security impact levels are changed. The system name and security categorization impact levels for the controls listed on the sheet are displayed at the top of the form for reference. Similar to the control information form, this form is populated with the Update Form button. When the Update Form button is selected, a pop-up menu appears. This menu gives the users options for RSAT population. The first option I would like to discuss allows the user to decide if they want to reference not applicable controls identified in the Unified Facility Criteria, Cybersecurity of Facility-Related Control Systems, Appendix H2. These controls were populated as not applicable on the control information form. However, because there are so many more lines associated with the CCIs on the test result export form, the user has the option to choose if they want to mark these controls as not applicable or leave these controls blank on this form. It is recommended that the user implement the UFC covered CCIs if they did not choose to change the status of these controls on the previous form. When this option is selected, the compliance column for any UFC non-applicable control is set to not applicable. The current date is entered in the date tested field. RSAT identifies the user as the project manager or information system owner identified on the system information form, and a brief description that describes the UFC justification for FRIC's non-applicability is entered in the test results field. There is also an option to enter Tier 1 and Tier 2 DoD inherited controls. This option populates the test results for any controls that have CCIs that are assessed and validated by DoD or service-specific guidance. Selecting OK populates these fields. Selecting this option is similar to the policy inheritance option in EMAS. This option is helpful if a user does not have access to the EMAS system but wants to identify DoD compliant controls. RSAT populates the compliance column with compliant, and the tested by column with the DoD CIO for any control that is related to DoD policy. For service-specific policy, the DoD component that was entered by the user on the system information form is populated. The date tested and test results are based on existing entries in the Army's EMAS system for these CCIs. The test results for service-specific policies have been adjusted to apply universally. The overlay options are similar to what was described in the previous form. For example, when I select to apply an overlay, I may receive a pop-up message to alert me that the overlay I'm about to apply is different from the overlay that I have applied on the corresponding control information form. By applying the ICS overlay, the RSAT tailors my worksheet to identify controls that are removed by this overlay. RSAT populates the CCIs that are removed by the ICS overlay as not applicable, and the test results are populated with text that document the use of the ICS overlay. For these rows, the date tested is populated with the current date, and the tested by field is populated with the ISO or project manager's name that was entered on the system information form. Similarly, there is an option to apply the FRICS moderate overlay. By selecting the FRICS moderate overlay, the worksheet is repopulated to identify controls that are not applicable based on this overlay. Similarly, controls that are removed by this overlay are repopulated as not applicable, and the test results fields contains text to document the application of this overlay. The overlay options will not adjust any of the CCIs that are inherited by DoD policy. The final option I would like to discuss is the option to apply the set of policy and procedures templates that accompany the RSAT application. These templates provide organizational security policy and procedures based on security control requirements for low or moderate FRICS. These templates are useful to organizations who do not have a complete set of security policies in place. The templates consist of an overview document and separate policy documents for each NIST security control family. There are also draft lists and log sheets related to ongoing maintenance requirements. To implement these policies, the user will need to tailor each to their system and organization. Placeholders are provided for system-specific text, and CCI numbers are included for easy navigation by validators. More details on these documents is provided in the user guide. Selecting the supporting templates populates these CCIs with compliant in the compliance column, and the test results are populated with descriptions based on the text in the supporting policy and procedures templates. And the date tested is populated with the current date. The tested by field is populated with the ISO or project manager name as entered on the system information form. Similar to the export option described in the control information form, I can export this form into an offline test results EMAS template. The EMAS test results template is displayed on the screen. I have selected the template worksheet and have enabled content in Excel. Data is entered into this template in the blue shaded fields titled enter test results here. These fields are read by EMAS and are the only fields populated by RSAT. Existing entries in the EMAS record are displayed in the latest test results field. If an EMAS template is imported with data entered into the blue fields for a record that has an existing test result, an additional record will be created for this CCI in the EMAS system. There are additional read-only fields in this template which are provided for informational purposes only. A 2020 update to the test results EMAS template included the addition of 3 additional read-only columns. These columns do not require data entry and are not displayed in the RSAT test results form. I am displaying the RSAT test results form as well as the external EMAS template on the screen. The export of data is accomplished with the Export Data button. Similar to the control information form, this opens a pop-up window where I am able to select the appropriate worksheet to export data into. If the worksheet does not appear in this window, I need to cancel and reopen the worksheet in Excel and then reselect the Export Data button to choose my appropriate worksheet. After I select the worksheet, I can run the export. RSAT exports data using a match on the CCI number between RSAT and the external template. When the export is complete, a list of non-exported values appears in a pop-up window. As mentioned in the demonstration of the control information form, these controls have been identified by RSAT as applicable to the security categorization. However, they were not identified in the external EMAS template. The user should review this list to determine if the EMAS record must be modified. In this worksheet, an additional pop-up is displayed. This pop-up displays the latest test results, which is the data in columns L through O on my external template. This data exists in the EMAS system. The pop-up also displays the proposed test results for comparison. This is the text that is proposed to be auto-populated by the RSAT software. I have created several fields in my external template that have existing data to demonstrate the capabilities of this feature. I am able to select or deselect to use the proposed test results for each row with the RSAT generated data. Selecting to use the proposed test results will populate the cells with RSAT generated data for this particular control into columns H through K on my external template. If I do not select this box, no data will be populated into columns H through K. Selecting Next moves to the next record, and Previous moves back to allow me to review the previous record. I have to go through each option using the Next button to verify whether or not I would like to populate data. I'm going to start on the first record in my list and select to use the test results for this record. Selecting Next moves to the next conflict. For this particular conflict, I'll choose to not use the test results. Therefore, I'm not selecting this box. Moving to the next record, I'll again choose to not use the proposed test results. I'll move to the next record, and this time choose to use the proposed test results from the RSAT system. Selecting Next, moves to the next record, and again, I'll choose to use the proposed test results. The absence of the next button tells me I have reached the end of my list. I can go back and re-review my results. When I'm happy with my selections, I select OK. I can cancel to choose to start over. I can use the proposed test results for all of the potential conflicts, or choose to use the latest results for all of the potential conflicts. I'm going to choose to select yes, and these 5 records will be imported into my external template based on the selections that I made. It is important to note that RSAT will not provide a comparison if the test results text is a complete match between the external template and the RSAT generated form. In this case, RSAT will automatically exclude this data from export into the external template. The baseline control summary lists the CNSSI 1253 controls that are applicable to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability security categorizations. The list provides a snapshot of the controls listed on the control information form. This summary updates each time the user updates the control information form in RSAT. The baseline controls in column A are the full list of applicable controls required by the security categorization and tailored by the control information form update form options. Controls that have been removed from the CNSSI 1253 baseline based on the application of an overlay are summarized in column B. Controls that have been added to the CNSSI 1253 baseline based on an overlay applied by the user are summarized in column C. The user may use this list to determine if any controls must be manually added to the EMAS registry. I want to point out that this list updates each time the control information form is changed. If I return to the control information form and regenerate a list using, for example, no overlay, the baseline control summary is updated. I can once again return to the control information form and re-update the list to apply an applicable overlay. Selecting OK regenerates the control information form as well as the baseline control summary.